Okay, this video is going to attempt, and I use that word very carefully, to show you how to build an Highscore entry system. I'm going to try and run through it quite quick, so you might need to pause and rewind and stuff for this. Okay, based on your template, you should have a Highscore table. So in Highscore display, I'm assuming you've sorted out what fields you're having in your Highscore settings. In the default code is where that's all set, which is here. Right, I'm not going to talk about that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the Highscore stable static. So in Highscore display, go to the very top, and you should see quite near the top inside the class line your score table. Just make it static. We'll need this because we're going to access it from the Highscore menu system we're going to build. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we're going to add a new class, okay, and we're going to call it Highscore menu. Okay, so just project add class and do that. Right, a couple of things we need to do. We've got to make it public when it comes up, and we need to make sure that we've got all the X and A components. So go to any one of your other files and copy all the library statements at the top, the using ones, and make sure they're put in with the Highscore one. Okay, that's going to be our first job. Right, now we can start building this menu system. We are going to inherit all the items from a standard menu in my game system and add some extra stuff. Okay, so we're going to do this in quite a nice way. The first thing we've got to do is create a constructor. So we use Highscore menu, and then we say base on the next line. I'll move the cursor out there, and we need a name for it, and we're going to tell it that it's a sprite. So we're actually, what we're doing is we're creating our advanced menu, but it's using the engine's menu, and we're just indicating to the engine what settings we want to for when this menu is created. Okay. Right, so when we create this, what we're going to do is we're going to set all the settings for the menu. So the first thing we need to do is to add this to the menu manager. So gm dot menu manager dot add, and we say the keyword this. Okay, so that adds it in. Now we need to build the initials that people are going to select, or the letters. Now you can do this millions of different ways. I'm going to do it in quite a nice straightforward way. I'm going to build a track, and I'm going to assign the letters along the track. So let's do that. So to build a track, some of you may have done this. Let's make capital P. No, we need vector 3. Vector 3. I said it was an attempt. And what we're going to do is, so we just enter that line. That creates a linked list to store some positions. And I just want a straight line. Okay, that's all I'm going to do. If you want to split this up, you can modify this later on and make separate lines, but I'm just going to do a straight line. So I'm going to say points dot add new vector 3, starting at 100. I'm going to put it in the middle of the screen somewhere, so that's going to be gm dot screen. I'll get gm dot screen size dot center dot y, and z I'm not bothered about, so I'm just going to put 1000 for that. So that creates 1 point. That's the start position, and I'm going to put an end position. So I'm going to get alphabetic characters, but I also want to be able to rub out and say I've finished as well. So I'm not going to do this right at the edge of the screen. So I'm going to just go gm.screen size right minus 200, and you can play about with these numbers. I'm not going to deliberate over this. If they're in the wrong positions, you need to fix it. Okay, so you've added those, and we'll come on to those in a minute. So we're going to create a track definition. We're just going to call it TDH. I'm not. It's a throwaway. It's a local variable. And then we're going to use the track helper, and of the track helper we're going to have some points. So we want it to generate a load of points along this line. Now, the name of the track doesn't actually matter, so I'm just going to call it high entry. Right, and we want to know how many points we want. Now we're going to do the letters A to Z plus a space, so that's 27. So we want 27 points generated, so we can sit our letters at each position along this track, 27 of them. And the points we're going to use are the ones we just created. Okay, right, now what we're going to do is we're going to build the letters that are going to go on the menu. And a nice thing about that is we're going to right, don't know what happened then. It's going to be a little bit funny. Right, so we've created the track that we're going to use. Now we need to say what we want to appear on the string. Okay, so we need to specify, and we're going to use case characters. I want space. So they're the characters that we're going to create. Okay, and then we're going to add to the menu. So I'm going to say this, oops, take caps lock off, this dot add list of sprites, but we're going to use the text manager to generate this list of menu sprites. It's called sprite character to generate character sprite list. It's specifically written just for this reason. Now this is going to get along this line, so I'm going to break this and put it on the next. So generate character list of sprites. It wants to know what font, so I'm going to use font bank vector. If you've got your own font, then you need to use it. Make sure it's static, so you can say gm dot. Then it wants to know what characters, so that's our alphabet. Then it wants to know how big. I'm just going to leave them, I might make them size, no, I'll leave them one. And what colour, so I'm just going to leave them as white. Okay, you can do more advanced stuff than that, but that's just going to do a bog standard one. The next thing we need to do is to say that we're going to use a track. So we use this dot track and spacing. Tell it what track definition. Now that's the one we just made, TDH. And right, so we want to start at position 0, so that A is at the first point, which will have been that point, and hopefully the space is at that point. Okay, right, that should be all we need to do from that point, but we need some system for highlighting, so we're going to use selector on select sprite, and we'll set that to show selection, and this dot on reject sprite show normal, I'm going to call it, and I'm going to create these just here. So I'm going to say void show selection, and that's going to accept a sprite. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to make the scale bigger. Scale both equals, I'm going to change the colour as well. So I'm going to scale them to 2, and I'm going to change the wash to, oh, I don't know, red. So colour.red. The other one, the rejector show normal, just going to do the opposite of those. So I'm going to say s.scale, not scale velocity, scale both equals 1, s.wash, and I'll set it back to white. We'll be able to see the menu in a minute at least. What have I done there? Oh, it's got a capital S. Should have used the picker. Okay, so that creates that stuff. Now, that just builds the menu, it doesn't show it. So we need a method that we're going to create that shows the menu. So carrying on down the bottom, I'm going to say public. It's important to put public. I'm going to call it show menu, and all this is going to do is say this dot show. Alright, so what we're going to do is just going to test this. So we're going to bodge some code in. So I'm going to go to general logic, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit until I find loading logic. You shouldn't have prepared Pengo there. And I'm just going to hopefully say mn. Oh, I haven't created the menu. Gone a bit mad. Let's go to assets and create this menu, or make this menu exist. So let's scroll down to where we've got some menus. So I'm going to say public. Now it isn't a menu, it's a Highscore menu because we've created our own, and we're just going to say new Highscore menu. Hopefully that won't moan at us. No, it has. Oh, I haven't given a name for it. mn score. Let's call it score entry. Okay, so that's great. So we don't need to do any of the work because we've just created the menu code inside itself. Okay, right. So as a test, back to general logic, looking for the loading logic. Remember, you can use this drop down to find subroutines quicker. It's alphabetical. So I'm looking for loading logic. Comment out going to the title screen, and all I'm going to do is say mn score entry dot display. Oh, I can't remember what I called the bloody thing now. Hang on. Show menu. There is show menu. Okay, let's just run this and see if it works. Let's hope it works. I'm not having a good day. You'll probably find out that I haven't been recording by the time I finished that, which will annoy me. But we'll see. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Oh god, yeah, that's not going to work. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Can't do that because not everything's been initialized. So let's go back to assets. We can fix that. If we do that, and then we create the menus, is where I should have done it. I was being a bit lazy. So let me just explain what I've done. What I've done is I've deleted the creation of it, and I've just got the storage of it. So in create menus, which I'm now going to look for. There it is. I'm just going to say mn Highscore entry equals new Highscore entry, and what that makes sure happens is that that isn't created until all the game components are created, which is why we had a crash. So let's just try that again. Should be alright now. Oh, . 5 by 0. Oh dear, hang on a minute. Okay, that was me being a plank, I think. It's doing it. What? Right, I've got to divide by 0 because I've been an idiot and I can't remember how my own system works. Back to the Highscore menu code. When we set up the track, we said space it every 0 positions. So that's what it uses as a divider. I meant actually spread it across every single position. So 1 character per point. So I should have changed that to a 1. Right, let's run it again. Let's hope it really works this time. I might stop the video here so I can start anew when I'm fresh. And there you go, we got it. And I highlighted in Hey. Obviously you can't see the space. But you could do that by adding a tag in there. Okay, so that's just testing purposes. Right, let's just get this baby working now. Right, so when we show the menu, what we want to do is we want to activate a load of key code so we can do key checks. We could put it all in get input, but let's build it in here so we're not worrying about it too much. Right, so I'm going to create another subroutine called hide menu. Okay, and that's going to do some opposite things. So that's going to say this dot hide for one thing. Right, I'm going to create an event, and I'm going to create that event at the top of the Highscore menu class. So I'm going to say event. I'm going to create several. So I'm going to have EV logic timer. No, I'm just going to call it logic. I'm going to make sure it's got a capital E, or otherwise it'll use a .NET event, which we don't want. And I'm going to have a timer for my key. Oh no, I'm not going to have a timer. I'm going to have a timer for my clock. So event clock. I'm going to have a clock that counts down, so I can do it. I need a value for the value of the clock, and when that gets to 0, we're going to stop the Highscore entry working. We're going to need to store the initials that have been entered as a string. What else might we want? We need a boolean to say that we've finished score entry. Now notice I'm not putting anything in front of these, so these are all private. Okay. But I'm going to make this one public, and I'm going to make this one public. I shouldn't do this, you should encapsulate them, but it doesn't matter. But no, I can leave that one private actually. But the score entry complete will need to be public, and we'll see why later. Right, so we're going to set all those up when we show the menu. So we're going to set the clock to 30 seconds. Oh, I'll do it 20 seconds, don't have to wait. You can change that. I'm going to set the initials to nothing, so we haven't got an entry yet. Right, I'm now going to say EV clock equals new event. So I'm going to create this event, and it's going to be every second. It's just going to do a little countdown. Give it a silly name, clock counter, and it's going to run a reduced clock. Or I'm going to call it tick, because that's what clocks do. That doesn't exist yet, so we'll create that in a minute. I'm going to create the other I think it's logic, the other event, new event. Right, now we're going to run this all the time. Oh, we could slow down. No, let's do it every 10th of a second. We're going to run this code, and this is entry logic, we'll call it. These text bits for the events are just for debugging purposes, so you can see if timers are active and things. So I'm going to call this control entry. That's what I'm going to call it, and that'll do me. So we're going to run 2 subroutines. So let's just add these to the event manager. So gm.event manager.add event EV clock. Or EV logic can go in, I don't mind. And the other one is the clock. Add event EV clock. Okay, so we asked the event manager to do it. So it's going to do some work for us. We better create these two items. So let's do void tick, and all that's going to do is say clock minus minus, which takes one off, and if clock is less than or equal to 0, then what we're going to do is say make an entry. Now this doesn't exist yet, but we're going to say whatever entries are in there, we're going to do it. Okay, so we're going to make an entry. I'm going to create that subroutine, so generate method stub, and I've created it. Okay, right, we need to do the control one. So let's just go above void tick and do void control entry. Right, so this is going to do key checking, so we can put this code in here now. One thing that I've not thought about is when we show the menu, we've got a score that we want to dump. So I'm going to have to pass it the score I want to mess about with, and I need to save that. So I'm going to say this dot new score equals score. This doesn't exist, so I'm going to right click and say generate field, and it will have created that hopefully at the top. There you go. That's made it private. If you're having a big score, you might want to make that an int 64 instead of an int. We'll need that score later when we do the entry code. Okay, right, so the control entry code has got to, at a minimum, do key checks. So I'm just going to use gm.inputManager key down, or key held I'm going to use. No, I'll do key down. Now because I'm only running this once every 1/10 of a second, that isn't going to bother. You know, I can adjust that 0.1 there to slow this down, speed it up. So I'm just going to keys dot left. You don't have to keep pressing, so you're going to be able to hold the key down. And all we're going to do is we're going to say this dot previous, check for the other key, key down, keys dot right, and this dot next. Okay, to see the countdown happening, we're going to need to do some output. So just above the key checks, let's do some print out of the clock. So let's say gm.textmanager.draw, and we want to do gm.fontbank.vector, and what do I want? So time, and then I'm going to use the tilde character because I want it to appear below it, plus clock, the clock amount. And where am I going to set that? So gm.screen size.center.x, and I'm going to set it at 10, and I'm going to center the text, or top the text, so I've got a border of 10. Okay, so that's the plan. I'll need to display the initials at some point, so I'm going to say textmanager.draw gm.fontbank.vector initials, and I'm going to display that in the center of the screen. And a bit further down, so just below the clock. Now I want this to be big, so I'm going to create a new text attribute, and I'm going to scale it by 3, 4, let's go for 5. Kerning I'm going to keep the same, and I'm going to colour this blue. Okay, right, so let's just run this just to check this works in the left and right. Oh, I made a mistake. Oh, show menu, right, let's give it a score in show menu. So that's going to be, well, the easiest way to do that is to say 60. You need a score that's going to be top score, so I'm just going to use that for now. So 670,000, whatever that means. That's interesting problem. Right, so you can see that we can hold down the key and it moves. The problem is the text is flickering. So what we need to do is create a separate event for displaying everything in the Highscore menu. Okay, so I'm just going to create another event. So display, just at the top of Highscore menu. It's because it's not being drawn every single time. That's the only problem with it. Okay, so let's just create the code for that. So EV display equals new event, and we'll do it at 100 times a second, which is the default for the engine. And we'll just call it display, the subroutine that we're going to run. So let's just add that in, gm.event, manager.add event, EV display. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to say void display, and I'm going to move these two commands into there, which is sort of good because it means that my control logic is separate. Okay, so let's run it again, and the clock shouldn't be flickering now. There you go. So the clock's updating 100 times a second. The key check's only been done every 10th of a second. And you can see, there you go, there's the high line. Don't worry about the mouse thing in the center screen, I haven't cleared anything off the screen. Okay. Right, what we want to do though, when we show the menu, we created this variable here, score entry complete. What we're going to do is we're going to set that to false when we show the menu. Oops. So we're going to say score entry complete equals false. If the timer runs down, which is when we run make entry, okay, we're going to say score entry complete equals true. Okay. Now what we can do in our general logic code, back into general logic now, I'm going to put a state in case for state.highscore entry. Hopefully in your Highscore entry code, that's what you should have, Highscore entry. Okay, so back to general logic, and I'm just going to do a check. I'm going to say if mn score entry dot what was it called, score entry complete. If that's true, then I'm going to show the Highscore display. So we're just waiting for that to trigger down. So all we're doing in the game loop while the score entry is being done is just sitting waiting to find out it's been complete. And if it is, we're going to say prepare Highscore display. Because normally when you've entered a score, you go straight to your Highscore display. Okay. Right, so we're cooking on gas so far. Now, what I'm going to do is just test that. So I'm going to leave it to count down, and then I'm just going to refactor a few bits. So watch the countdown. We haven't got any initial entry yet, but I'll do that in a minute. And then I'll have to stop this video and we'll start a new one in a minute. I've got to go for a run, unfortunately. Ah, it's gone -1. That didn't work to plan. So we'll have to have a look at that, see if that's actually working. Oh no, it won't be working. Hang on a minute, I'm being stupid. Because we've hacked this at the minute, we're not in that game state because we did this. So let's take this out of here, out of loading logic in general logic, put our prepare title. Well, we were going to do, if we do prepare Highscore entry instead, which will run this code, we put the right game state and then we'll do the score entry. So let's try this again. So just watching this jig down. Assuming this works, I will pause the video at this point and then we'll do another video. Okay, I'll do a quick recap before I do that. But this should, when it counts down now, the general logic code should be waiting to trigger and show the Highscore display. And there you go. Alright, so let's just have a look. So at the minute I've bodged the loading logic so that when everything's loaded up, instead of going to the title screen, I go to Highscore entry. Okay, and in our Highscore entry, that's when we show the Highscore entry menu. And in the Highscore entry, we've got quite a few bits in there. They're only little bits though, all of it's little. We've got the display code, which sets for these events. The last thing I want to do actually is remove all these events. So when I hide the menu, I'm going to say gm.eventmanager.remove, and then I'm going to give it our events to remove. So that's remove the clock, remove the display checker, remove the logic, I think it was logic one. So we're getting rid of those events, destroying them. Okay, so they can't keep happening. But really, when we're going to Highscore display, that probably does clear all the events anyway, but I just want to, we do it for completeness. Okay, right, I'm going to stop the video there, which I think is Control F8, and I'll see you on the second side.